Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Today I'm going to have a go at picking up on the Project Orchids, so hopefully I'll get part one finished by the end of today. It's not going to have all the black cloth and everything. I haven't got time, plus I don't even know where I put the black cloth. I think it's in the shed somewhere. So we'll just do it on the workbench, but in these final updates, parts 1, 2, 3 and 4, we will get the stills out covering the whole period of the project. So from our initial look through to update 1 and update 2 and on through to these final updates. So we will look at each still from each one of the updates for the particular orchid, and then a short video clip of what it looks like now and whether my goals were achieved, whether we've even still got the plant or whether it's been lost, and we'll go from there. But I want to try and keep these relatively short on the grounds there's 4 of them to get through, and they do take time to put together, an awful lot longer to put together than they take to watch. But nonetheless, I need to complete the project. So 4 parts coming up, part 1 today, the Oncidium Alliance. Okay, first one up then, Miltoniopsis species, variety xanthina, the yellow variety, but then crossed back with the species. This is showing it as I'd not long got it from Burnham's, with hardly any roots and what I would call a relatively young plant. So a good selection for a project plant because it was new to me and it had only just, been acquired. Now, 3 months on, we've got the thing potted up and we've got signs of new growth at the base. This is always good. And in addition to that, the existing leaves on the plant have been maintained. So I won't say it's happy, but it's relatively happy. It's still not going to like the summer heat and will grow slowly, if at all, while it's too hot. But it's surviving. That's part of the story. 3 months on, we've still got a good set of leaves and we've got some growths maturing. So we've also got some roots in the pot. So I'm happy to say that this one has taken. It's adapted to my environment. Strictly speaking, this one will tolerate a bit more heat than other Miltoniopsis. But nonetheless, it's in a good position to progress onwards now. Very pleased. Let's see what it looks like now. So this one has progressed reasonably okay, given that I have struggled in the past with Miltoniopsis because of the heat in the summer, which knocks them down, and then they struggle to recover enough to actually go through the same again the following year. So hopefully in this new place we won't get that long period of heat, and these should do better. Now the good thing about this is we've got root growth. That's what's required. If you haven't got a good root system and then you apply an element of stress to a Miltoniopsis, like heat, then they're not going to do very well. But once they establish a reasonable root system, they're much better able to support a bit of stress. Now hopefully this year we've got 2 growths on here that haven't fully matured yet. They haven't developed a full pseudobulb. Hopefully they will. And I'm hoping that this growing season, 2022, will actually get some new growths and build up the strength of the plant. With the view to viewing possibly on these latest growths here, or I would hope definitely on the next set. So that would be by the end of this current growing season. It'll take that long to mature the bulbs. But I'm pleased with its progress. I mean, this is actually quite a rare version, simply because it's not just the variety Xanthia, it's actually crossed back with the original species. Yeah, so I was dubious whether it would still come out yellow, whether the variety strength would come through in the coloration, but I chatted with both Sarah and Arthur, and they were confident that the ones they had seen flower in the past came out yellow, so I took the risk. So hopefully we will see some blooms on this in the not too distant future, and if not on these latest growths, then I would say pretty reasonably certainly on the following ones, so towards the end of the growing season. Right, at the start of the project, this naevium was in a poor state, and it's a bit misleading because it looks like a substantial plant when in fact it's lots of little pieces all put in the same pot together and strapped up. At this stage of the game it hadn't been in that pot long, so I didn't know whether these pieces were going to grow, all of them, some of them or none of them. Let's have a look 3 months on. So we managed to get some blooms. I was surprised, but it's difficult to see, but the existing roots on this plant are dying back, and I don't see any signs of new roots at this point in time. There's some fading on the leaves, some yellowing, so at this point in time I'm not sure whether this is going to make it, but as it's lots of pieces we may end up with 1 or 2 pieces that work. Okay, 3 months on then, you can see the plant's going downhill badly. Although it's not obvious, the base of the plant is rotting in many places. So basically I've got to take the bull by the horns and get this out and see what I've got and just keep what's good. Because if I leave it as it is, the rot's going to set into the whole plant and then I'll lose the lot. So, you know, let's see what this looks like today, if at all. Okay, well the plan was to separate all those plants because the rot was setting in. This was the only piece that was savable, and it's now going in the bin. Now that I've looked at it, I've picked it up and leaves just fell off of it. It's just not viable. It's shriveled beyond recognition. It's got no roots, so I'm just going to dump that now. We'll say bye-bye to that one. If I see another one of these that's a good plant, I will get it again because I really do like the blooms, but I'm not happy to have that lying around. So out you go. Right, next up we have the Twinkle Red Fantasy, and basically this was a large plant. Take a look at the top right hand corner at that picture. That was in its mass blooming days when it was a large plant, but I decided to split it, so some pieces went to other people. This is the piece I kept. It's actually 2 pieces, so there's like a row along the top and then another row along the middle. That bit along the middle didn't look too happy, but it was worth a try. So as I said, I split that large plant, and what we ended up with was 3 plants. Now the 2 on the left, or the centre and the left, they went to other people. I can't remember who they went to, but if either of the people that had that are watching, did they progress? Did they actually grow on? They were obviously newly mounted, put in live moss, I can't remember which sort, hopefully to grow on. And then, as I said, the piece on the right, or 2 pieces on the right on a single mount, was what I actually chose to keep. So let's have a look and see what that looks like in update 1, 3 months on. So there we go. The middle section, or the bit in the middle of the mount, doesn't look too happy, although it does have a new growth pushing out dead centre. The piece at the top has got several new growths. There's one to the left, one in the middle, one out to the right. And there are roots pushing down through the moss from that top piece, although I don't see any roots growing from the piece in the middle, which still doesn't look that happy, quite honestly. But that's what it looked like in update 1. Let's see what it looks like in update 2. Right, not a lot of difference really, apart from the fact you can see that the new growths have pushed on. The piece in the centre of the mount has got an additional new growth. The original one that was bang in the middle has grown on a bit, and a new one's joined it. But if you look at the new growths on the top piece, they've pushed on a lot. The leaves are pushing on nearly up to full size now. At this point the bulbs are just about starting to form. So the top piece is looking good for blooming later in the year. So let's see where we are today. Did we actually get those blooms? And the Twinkle did manage to push out some bloom spikes on the new growths, and this top section I've now just cut another one off. I've cut 3 older bulbs out because they've started to rot. It needs more roots, and I think it needs less moss. I think this is a bit heavy-handed with the moss. The lower section, the old bulbs have rotted, just leaving one of the latest growths out of the 2. So it's not happy as it is, and I think it's just got too much moss round it. And with the frequency of watering, you know what I'm like, I don't treat plants separately. So when I water my mounts, with the exception in the winter of the resting dendrobiums, they all get watered when I water them. And I think this one is just holding too much water because of the shear. If you look at the curvature, it was mounted on the back. So the curve goes that way and the wires go across. This moss is deep. I think it's just far too heavy on the moss. So I will tease some out. I'm hoping to get away with not having to remount it. But I will tease a lot of that moss away so that there's a lot less of it and it doesn't stay as wet. But we did manage to get some blooms. A bit of a colour changer. That's what they open like here anyway, and then they fade to that. But anyway, a bit of a survivor, and I think next year we should see some reasonable growth, and it'll probably almost double in size. Nowhere near the size it originally was if you go back to the start of this plant and look at the picture in the top right hand corner of the mass blooming on the large size plant I once had. Maybe we'll get back to that size again one day. Okay, one of the biggies this time. This is quite a bit of a monster. Cheated a bit, that's a picture off the internet, it's not mine. Mine is still yet to bloom, but we did have a problem with it. At this point in the game, it had not long been repotted, and it had a nice set of new growths across what is now the front of the plant, leaving space for new growths. Traditional way of potting on my part. So let's see how that progressed then. Okay, you can see now that those growths that were new before have matured. They've got their colour, but they've also desiccated. Why might that be then? Well, why that might be is a slug ate off all my nice new root system across the front of the plant, and it's having to start again. But it is making an effort to start again. If you look carefully at the base of the plant, there is a new growth just starting. So let's see what that looks like in update 2. Right, you can see that new growth is pushing on strong, and in doing so is creating some new roots. Also out to the right hand side of the plant is a second new growth. So the point we were at here, at this part in the project, was 2 new growths pushing on strong and producing some new roots. But those should have been in addition to, not instead of. Thank you, Mr. Slug. It's strange, this plant, the Rossioglossum, the way it matures its bulbs. Because when its growths are new and pushing on strong, it looks like it's going to have quite a few leaves. And then basically what looks like leaves just become these bracts which die back. And all you're left with is the 2 leaves on the top. Occasionally 3, but mainly 2. And very pleased with the latest 2 new growths, because the bulbs that have been produced are much bigger than anything previous on the plant, so that's good progress and builds the strength of the plant. And also, if you remember when we looked at this either in the last update or the update before, the old pseudo bulbs were badly shriveled where I'd lost my root system. They've all plumped up nicely, so the plant's got its strength back. It's grown some roots. It hasn't got a strong, healthy root system for the size of the plant, but it's got some. And in the not too distant future, I suspect we'll have some new growths, and that'll build up the strength of the plant even more. Now, this is an unbloomed plant. I cheated on this one. The picture at the start of the section is off the internet. I stole it. Sorry, borrowed it. I'll put it back later. But it's now quite a good strong plant, but apparently they are reluctant to bloom until they really have gained some size. So I don't know at what point spikes grow on this one. I just don't know. Will they grow on the 2 existing growths, or will it have to wait for the new growths? I presume they come out from the base somewhere. But anyway, no sign of anything as yet. It's currently not growing. It's matured its bulbs and it's effectively dormant at this point in time. It's not growing anything. There's no new roots, no new growths, and the existing bulbs are all full size now. But it's maintaining itself, keeping all its leaves and doing okay. I'm pleased with this one, but I really would like to see a spike in this growing season. That would be nice. Continuously non-blooming is threatening your existence, mate, despite being a good-looking plant. So there we go, one of the biggies, and doing very well. Despite having all its roots chomped off, it's recovered quite nicely. So, doing okay. Now, one of my favourite Tolumnias, Tolumnia Peach. This plant needed to come off the mount. The mount was starting to break down and the moss was old. So at this part in the project, it was still on its old mount in old moss, but I had planned to take it off and remount it, and any older parts of the plant would probably be removed at the same time. So on to update 1. And here you can see the plant has been remounted. It's in live moss now, set relatively near the top of the mount so that there's plenty of roots for the place for the roots to go downwards. Thank you, mouth. Not a bad looking plant, a bit purpley where it gets bright light, bordering on the limit to what it can get. So let's see how we progressed into update 2. So here we go then. It actually produced quite a few roots into the moss, so they're not very visible because they did actually go right into the moss, not over the top. And you can see new growth. There's a new growth pushing out at the base. There's also 2 out to the left hand side, identified by the nice bright green leaves without any purple. I think we're getting the light a bit closer to where it should be now. See what that looks like today then. And you know what I've always said, if you see a problem, deal with it, don't leave it. And I've just picked Tolumnia Peach up and it's badly wobbling. It's not very well attached to its mount. Yeah, it's become loose and you can see it's pulling away. And that's probably because some of those older roots detached. Could be the weight of the plant or when it last had spikes on. But the base of the plant is sort of okay. It's in live moss and there is some root activity off of the latest growths, which is this one and this one. But it's starting to desiccate on the older part of the plant. And I think that's because this set of roots up here are not hydrating because they're not against anything. So I'm going to stick this on the tripod. I'll do it now, part of this video. We'll get some extra moss and we'll get this wired on nice and tight and hopefully it'll hydrate a bit better. So I'll switch to the tripod. Okay, so I'll get a little bit of moss. I want to tuck some moss down in here, in around this area, to try and get those roots hydrated. So we'll just grab a bit of live moss out of the tray. I don't need a huge amount, just enough to go in that area. So we'll drop a little bit inside. So that'll tuck down in that void. So that's underneath the roots, and then the rest of it I'm just going to gently put round there. And then we'll have to get that to stay there, of course. So I've got a length of wire here. This is only medium wire, this is very, very flexible. I'm going to go through the middle of the plant there and take that round the back so that I've got something to fix to when we've finished, and then we'll take that across the plant, pull it quite tight, and then I'm going to go round again at the top of the plant to hold that moss in place. But before I do that, I'll cut the wire. And then we'll just go across the top there and pull that moss down. And then hopefully we are pulling the plant nice and tight. And we've got two ends here which should just bind together. Just pull them together, give them a twist like that, and then use the pliers to twist them harder and pull. So you can pull it out and twist. Bonsai thing, that is. And it will just keep pulling tighter and tighter until such point as you have overcooked it and the wire snaps. Which we won't do. Right, so have we got the plant nice and tight now? Yes. I think that will be a lot happier like that with some moss around those roots. So there we go. So back to the actual Project Orchids, which is what we were supposed to be doing, not supposed to be mounting stuff. We've actually got some progress on here. We've got a sequence of new growths out here. This one's still pushing on, although it looks a little weak. This was the dehydrated one that got me worried in the first place. This new growth's pushing on, and this one's pushing on, and there's another one in the centre pushing on. So there's plenty of new growth, which once we get the warmer weather will initiate roots and speed. It will start growing faster. But it's done okay. I'm pleased with its progress. It's not a bad looking Tolumnia, not bad. Hopefully one of these new growths, or maybe more, will produce a spike when we get into the warmer growing season. So these don't grow very well for me in the winter. It's a bit too cold. So they just slow right down. They don't die or anything dramatic like that, but they don't grow that well through the winter. It's just a bit too cool for them. I mean, they come from the Caribbean area. We in the UK go there for our holidays because it's nice and warm and sunny. Unfortunately, it's not warm and sunny in the UK winter. So coming on, not doing bad. Last up is the one with the strange name. You can have a go at pronouncing that yourself. Not long acquired from Burnham's, and did I get it from Burnham's? I think I did. Anyway, not long acquired. Some roots and a new growth pushing out to the right, and this is the mount it came on. So I haven't actually remounted this. I believe that's true anyway. So update 1. Right, what we've got now is new growth pushing on, one out to the right, pushing on strong, one facing us, and root production well underway. It didn't have very good roots, but it probably had enough to sustain the plant. But obviously now it's pushing out a whole new set. Not necessarily coming from the base of the new growth, strangely enough. But it's got a strange name, so you'd expect it to grow oddly. So update 1, we've got a maturing growth out to the right there, and a mass of roots out to the right hand side which have no moss on. So they are beginning to be a worry on the grounds that they don't fully hydrate by pouring water over them. So in the longer term plan we may have to do something about that, but it might have to wait until spring. Anyway, growing okay, seems to be doing okay, and picture off the internet. And last but not least is the Mexicoa. Now this is yet to bloom, but what it has done in this growing season is it's matured a couple of growths. It lost one that I cut off, started to go a funny colour and feel a bit soggy, so I thought you're coming off. But what it has done is generated a very large and productive root system, which now looks wrong. If you look at this left hand side of the plant with its moss and the way its roots have grown down into the moss and out the other side, everything looks normal. But when you come over here it doesn't, because there wasn't any moss on this side of the mount. This isn't my mount because obviously I don't do wire like that. That's steel wire, that's incredibly difficult to bend, and at that gauge as well it's way over the top. But anyway, what this needs now is some help with this root system. So it needs some more moss. I'm not going to do it now, I will do it as a separate thing. But I don't want to take it off the mount now because it's so well attached. The roots are even going round the back. So it's growing okay, yet to bloom. I don't know how near maturing this plant is. Some plants need to mature for quite a few years before they'll actually attempt to bloom, and others bloom as young plants like the Tolumnias do, but I don't know about this one. It's not one I'd ever heard of until I got it. Anyway, we need some maintenance on that. It needs some more moss, and I'll put up with it on this mount for a bit longer, but it's not going to be too much longer, and it's going to be off the edge. So it's got a limited life on this mount, but in the meantime it's not being hydrated as well as it should be because there's too many aerial roots, and it needs a bit of help. But nonetheless, it's done okay. It's grown reasonably well this season. I was hoping for some blooms on the latest growths, but not this time, so hopefully next time. That's all you can do, is just wait for the next set of growths on Oncidium types. If they're going to bloom, they get on with it. They're not one of these like Cattleyas, you know, they mature their growth, grow a sheath, and then sit there for 3 months doing absolutely nothing. If you're going to get a spike on an Oncidium, it'll be there while the bulb's growing, either halfway up or 3/4 of the way up, or just as it matures. There's no sort of rest period with these. If it's going to bloom, and they just get on with it. So anyway, it's doing okay. I'm quite pleased with it so far, but I would like to see some blooms during this coming growing season. That would be good. Okay, so that's the final update for the Project Orchids Part 1, the Oncidium Alliance. What we need to be doing now, possibly, as each one of these final updates takes place, like that was the Oncidium Alliance, is what we're going to do for this growing season. Am I going to maintain the 4 separate sections, or should we rethink that idea? And obviously we'll need a new set of plants if we're going to continue this logic of actually having a set of Project Orchids. Or should we just have one set of Project Orchids that's a mix and tries to combine as many different types of the orchids that I've got, and perhaps just have one representative of each type? Anyway, food for thought. And yeah, I was going to say that Oncidium Alliance, I do have a lot of Oncidiums, and they do vary quite a bit. You know, from miniatures to pretty large ones, especially the Miltonias. So we'll have a think about what's to come next. How are we going to do this project again this year, or should I just give it a miss for a year and come back to it later? But for those of you who are relatively new to the channel, we've been doing the Project Orchids set for several years now, different set of plants each year, maintaining the 4 parts, the 4 sections, and taking them from the start of the growing season through to the end of the growing season. They're just a bit late this year. The final update should have been started at the beginning of December, but I've had other things going on this time round. So anyway, that's part 1 done. Part 2 will follow shortly, which is the Dendrobiums. So we'll see how they did in their growing season.